I want to tell you about the best cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. I have to start there, because I need you to understand why I stayed as long as I did that night, and why nothing about it felt like a warning while it was happening. Looking back now, that's the part that still gets to me, not what happened afterward. How good it felt while it was happening. It's been 2 years, and there are still nights I think about going back. But let me back up. It was a Tuesday in November, and I was driving home from my mother's. She'd taken a bad fall 4 days earlier, and I'd spent 3 of those days in a hospital hallway, then a rehab facility hallway, then her kitchen, making sure she ate something and took her pills on schedule. By the time I finally got in my car to leave, I hadn't slept more than a few broken hours across 3 nights. I just wanted my own bed. I wanted it badly enough that when my GPS suggested a shortcut off the interstate, a 2-lane county road that would save me almost an hour, I took it without really thinking about it. I'd never driven that stretch before. There were no other headlights. No gas stations, no billboards. Nothing but dark fields and the occasional mailbox catching my high beams for half a second before the dark swallowed it again. My phone had dropped to 1 bar somewhere around the first hour, then to nothing at all. I remember thinking, in a distant kind of way, that if my car broke down out there, nobody would know where to even start looking for me. I was too tired to be scared about it. I was too tired for almost anything by that point, which matters more than I understood at the time. Around 1 in the morning, I saw a light. It wasn't much. A low building set back from the road, a hand-painted sign I couldn't read yet, a scatter of gravel where a parking lot should have been. A diner, lit up like it was the middle of a Sunday afternoon, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, in the middle of the night. I remember being surprised there was a building out there at all, let alone one that was open. My hands had started to shake a little on the wheel, the way they do when I've pushed myself too far past tired. I pulled in without really deciding to. The bell over the door was the kind you only get after 30 years of people opening and closing it. Inside, it was warm in a way that made my whole body ache with relief, the kind of warm you don't notice you've been missing until it's suddenly all around you. 6 booths, a counter with 4 stools, a jukebox in the corner that wasn't playing anything. 2 truckers at the counter, not talking to each other. An old man alone in a booth by the window, a thermos in front of him instead of a cup. A woman came out from the back before I'd even picked a seat. 60, maybe, an apron that had clearly seen decades of use, a name tag that just said "Dot." "You look like you've had a week," she said. It wasn't really a question. I told her I had. She didn't ask for details, and I was grateful for that. She just told me to sit wherever I liked, and brought me coffee before I'd ordered a single thing, and it was, without exaggeration, the best cup of coffee I have ever had. I've tried to explain that to people since, and I still can't do it justice. It didn't just taste good. It tasted like something I hadn't known I'd been missing for a very long time. She asked what I wanted to eat, and before I could answer, she said, "You want the sour cherry pie?" Trust me on that one, and she was right. I hadn't had sour cherry pie since I was a kid at my grandmother's kitchen table, hadn't thought about it in probably 15 years. And somehow this stranger in a diner in the middle of nowhere had looked at me for maybe 4 seconds and known exactly what I needed. I didn't think that was strange at the time. I want to be honest about that because it matters. It felt like being taken care of. It felt like the first time in 3 days that anyone had looked after me instead of the other way around. And after everything with my mother, I would have let almost anyone take care of me for a few minutes, no questions asked. At one point, Dot glanced at the keys I'd set on the table, an old brass one on the ring next to my house key, and said, "That was your grandmother's, wasn't it?" Not a guess, a statement. I told her it was, and asked how she could possibly know that. She just smiled, said something about how you can tell by looking, and refilled my coffee. I let it go, because by then the warmth of the place had settled into me so completely that almost nothing felt like it needed an explanation. The old man by the window was watching me the whole time, not in a way that felt threatening, more like he recognized something in me that he'd seen before. When I got up to use the bathroom, he said, quietly, almost gently, "Eat before you go, not after." I asked him what he meant. He just looked back down into his thermos and didn't say anything else. I didn't push it. I was warm and tired, and the pie hadn't come yet. I ate the pie. I finished the coffee. I sat in that booth longer than I meant to, 20 minutes, maybe 25, though somehow it felt like both no time at all and a very long time. the way real rest sometimes does. When I finally stood up to leave, Dot was already wrapping something else in wax paper. "For the road," she said, and pressed it into my hands before I could tell her I hadn't ordered a second slice. When I asked what I owed her for the meal, she waved me off and said something like, "You needed it more than the register does tonight, honey." And that was that. I didn't argue. I wasn't in a state to argue with kindness. I got back in my car feeling better than I had in days. Not just less tired, lighter, somehow, like something that had been sitting on my chest since the hospital had quietly gotten up and left the room. I set the wrapped pie on the passenger seat and took a picture of it through the windshield, the diner's window glowing warm and yellow behind it, meaning to text it to my sister with some joke about finding the best pie in America in the middle of a cornfield. My phone still had no signal. The photo just sat there, waiting, unsent. I pulled back onto the road. The radio picked up something, an old song, static, fading in and out, and I remember being distantly aware that it was strange to be getting any signal at all out there with my phone showing 0 bars. I don't remember much else about the drive itself. I remember being tired in a good way, the way you're tired after finally eating a real meal, and then I don't remember anything else until my phone started buzzing. Not once. Continuously, the way a phone buzzes when it's trying to deliver everything it missed all at once. I was still on a county road, though looking back, I honestly couldn't tell you if it was the same one, and the second I had signal again, my phone didn't stop vibrating in the queue folder for almost a full minute. Messages arriving in a pile. Voicemail notifications stacking on top of each other. My sister, my mother's next door neighbor. A missed call from a number I didn't recognize, with the voicemail already attached. I pulled over to look, and the first thing that caught my eye wasn't the time, it was the date. By my own memory, I had left that diner around 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. According to my phone, it was now Thursday evening. I sat on the shoulder of that empty road for a long time, waiting for the screen to correct itself. It didn't. I opened the messages. My sister, growing more frantic across what looked like 2 full days, asking where I was, why my phone kept going straight to voicemail, whether I'd made it home at all. My mother's neighbor, checking whether I'd arrived safely, because apparently my mother had been trying to reach me and getting nothing back. As far as anyone could tell, nobody had heard from me in almost 2 days. As far as I could tell, sitting there on that shoulder, no more than 90 minutes had passed since I'd left the diner. I called my sister first. She picked up before it finished a single ring, and the relief in her voice cracked into something close to anger almost immediately. Where had I been? Why hadn't I answered? Did I have any idea she'd called the state police that morning to ask if there'd been an accident reported anywhere along my route? I told her I'd stopped for a late coffee. She asked where. Saying it out loud for the first time, I realized I didn't actually know. I'd never seen a proper sign, only a hand-painted board out front that just said, "Eat." I drove the rest of the way home checking the dashboard clock every few minutes, as if it might quietly correct itself the way a bad dream sometimes does the longer you stay awake. It didn't. My gas gauge didn't add up cleanly either. I'd left my mother's with just under half a tank and arrived home with just under a quarter, numbers that lined up almost exactly with the drive I actually remembered taking. Not with 2 extra days of driving, and not with 2 extra days of sitting somewhere with the engine running. Whichever way I looked at it, my car seemed to think nothing unusual had happened to it at all. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. If I hadn't been driving all that time, and I hadn't been parked somewhere burning gas, then I genuinely did not know where roughly 50 hours of my life had gone. I tried to find the diner online that first week. Every combination I could think of, the road name, nearby towns, diner, cafe, 24-hour. Nothing came up for that stretch of road at all. Not even a closed listing. Not even an old, abandoned review. I pulled up satellite images and traced the route as best I remembered it. And the spot I was fairly sure I'd stopped at showed nothing but a gravel turnout and what might have been the outline of a building foundation, grown over, looking like it had been empty for years. I still had the pie. It had sat in my car through however many days had actually passed, and it hadn't spoiled. Not soft, not moldy, not even properly cold. It looked exactly the way it had the second Dot wrapped it. I didn't eat it. I put it in a freezer bag and pushed it to the back of my own freezer, and I honestly don't know why, except that some part of me didn't want to throw it away, and a smaller, quieter part of me didn't want to admit that I was keeping it. In the weeks that followed, Small pieces of time kept slipping past me in a way they never had before. I'd be sitting at my desk and look up to find 40 minutes gone that I couldn't account for. I'd be driving somewhere familiar and arrive without any memory of the last 10 minutes of the trip. Nothing as dramatic as that first night, just small gaps, easy enough to explain away individually, harder to ignore once I started keeping track. I made an appointment with my doctor once, got as far as the parking lot, and turned around before I went in. Because I couldn't think of a way to describe any of it that didn't sound like I needed a very different kind of doctor. It was my sister who found the photo. I'd told her everything by then, the messages, the math on the gas gauge, the satellite images of nothing, and she asked if I had any actual proof I'd even been there. I remembered the picture I'd taken and never sent, and I pulled it up and handed her my phone. She went quiet, looking at it for longer than felt normal. Then she asked me who was standing in the window. I looked again. I'd photographed the pie on my dashboard with the diner glowing behind it through the windshield. And in the reflection of the diner's front window, barely there, easy to miss unless you knew to look for it, there was a woman's face. Not Dot, someone standing further back, half turned toward the glass. I told my sister I didn't remember anyone else being near that window. She kept staring at the photo, and then she said something that changed the entire shape of that night in my memory, in a way I still haven't fully recovered from. She said it looked like Louise. Louise had lived 2 houses down from us when we were kids. She'd gone out for milk one night when I was 9 and never come home. It became the biggest thing that had ever happened on our street, the kind of story that got retold at every family gathering for years, the kind of case that never closed and never really left. Louise would be in her 70s now, if she were still alive. The woman in the reflection of my photograph hadn't aged a single day past whatever she'd looked like the last time anyone in our family actually saw her. I want to be careful here, because I know exactly how this sounds. It's a blurry reflection in a dark window, taken at 1 in the morning by someone who hadn't slept properly in 3 days. My sister could be wrong. I could be wrong. But once she said that name out loud, neither of us has been able to unsee it since. I spent a few months doing the only thing I knew how to do with something like this. I researched. I drove that county road twice more, in daylight, looking for any trace of a building. I found the gravel turnout. I found what might have been a foundation, buried in weeds, and nothing else. I went looking through old missing persons cases across 3 states for any kind of pattern. And buried in a local news archive from 11 years earlier, I found a report about a long-haul trucker who'd turned up for days after his last confirmed stop. 2 states off his route, unable to account for any of the missing time, telling the deputy who interviewed him, almost word for word, that he'd stopped somewhere for the best meal of his life. I never found the diner again. Not exactly, but almost a year later, driving that same county road home from another visit to my mother, a smaller scare that time. Nothing serious, but enough that I was tired again, and alone again, and driving too late again. I saw a light. Not in the same spot. Further down, maybe 2 miles past where I remembered the turnout being. The same kind of low building. The same warm glow spilling out onto gravel. I felt the pull of it before I'd even fully registered what I was looking at, an actual physical pull, low in my chest. The same feeling I imagine draws anyone toward anything that promises to finally let them stop carrying whatever they're carrying. I wanted, more than almost anything, to pull in. I didn't. I made myself keep driving another 1/4 mile, then made myself stop the car, turn around, and park on the shoulder. I made myself walk back on foot, staying just outside the reach of the light, close enough to see through the front window. Far enough, I told myself, that I could still leave whenever I needed to. There was a man inside, 50s, maybe, alone in a booth, carrying himself with the particular slump of someone who has been holding something heavy for a very long time. A woman came out from the back. I couldn't tell you for certain it was Dot, and some nights I tell myself it wasn't, though most nights I know better. She set a plate down in front of him without him ordering anything, said something I couldn't hear through the glass. And I watched his shoulders drop in a way I recognized instantly, because I remembered exactly what that felt like from the inside. I could have gone in. I could have knocked on that glass and told him everything I knew. I stood there long enough that I could have done it twice over. I didn't, and it wasn't fear that stopped me. It was something worse. Some small, ugly part of me looked at how at peace he suddenly seemed, and envied him for it, and understood, in that moment, with total clarity, exactly why nobody ever warns anybody else. Just before I turned to walk back to my car, the woman behind the counter looked up, past him, straight through the glass at me. She didn't look surprised to see me there. She didn't look unkind. She just held my eyes for a second or two, the way you'd acknowledge someone you'd already come to understand, and then she looked back down at her work. I drove home that night, and I haven't driven that road since. I don't know what happened to the man in that booth. There are entire weeks where I manage not to think about any of it at all. I still have the pie in my freezer. I've never eaten it. I think about what the old man told me that night more than almost anything else that happened. Eat before you go, not after, and some nights I wonder if that's the only reason I got off as lightly as I did. 2 days, and nothing worse. I don't open the freezer to check on it anymore. I just know it's there. I've told this story exactly twice before tonight, both times to people who love me enough to believe me without needing proof I don't have. Here's the part I actually need you to understand, though, more than any of the rest of it. It isn't that I lost almost 2 days I'll never get back. It isn't even the reflection in that photograph or the man I didn't warn. It's that some nights, when I'm tired enough and everything feels heavy enough, I think about that road. I think about the coffee and the pie and the way Dot looked at me like she already knew exactly what I needed before I'd said a single word. The part that scares me now isn't that I lost 2 days. It's that some nights, I think I trade to more